Ubisoft's racing franchise, The Crew, has always been a weird one, with mixed reception at the launch of both games, but great and lengthy support throughout the years, ensuring a not massive but loyal fanbase, with 2018's The Crew 2 getting major updates even after 5 years. The new installment, Motorfest, takes a new yet familiar direction, one that may remind you of certain Horizons. Whereas the other two games are set in a miniaturized but still rather big United States, with each region offering the kind of biome you'd expect, The Crew Motorfest flies us into Hawaii in what was rumored to initially be a media expansion pack that eventually turned into a full-fledged standalone title. Giving credibility to this behind-the-scenes decision is the fact that the game features an evolution of the Crew 2's engine and all its gameplay features, with players even being able to import every single car they unlocked from that game, as all of that's already included here, alongside the wagons of new content, both present and future. Indeed, it's a smaller open world than the previous installments, but it's still a pretty chunky piece of land, with all kinds of biomes like mountain areas, beaches, a volcano, rainforests, fields of green, cave formations, and so on. Now, the Crew franchise, the second title especially, has never shied away from taking inspiration from the critical and commercial darling Xbox exclusive Forza Horizon. It's only natural to take cues from what is, arguably, the strongest open-world racing formula on market. The Crew Motorfest drops all subtlety and takes the players onto this island where there's a festival, a Motorfest. It has all kinds of themed events, colored banners everywhere, wacky announcers, female-voiced AI assistant GPS with an acronym name. Even the game's intro seems like a rejected Forza Horizon introduction, putting the player into various bite-sized cinematic moments at the wheel of different kinds of cars, with blasting energetic music and dramatic slow-mos for maximum effect. We know the Crew Motorfest is trying to beat Forza Horizon at home. The developer, Ivory Tower, knows it. The publisher, Ubisoft, knows it. But does the Crew Motorfest have enough going for it to stand out, and most importantly, to excite? The short answer? Yes. Yes, it does. Unless you imported your collection of cars from the Crew 2 or obtained some fancy pre-order or special bonus edition, the game begins with a Forza Horizon selection of one of 3 fairly basic street cars at the festival site. At this point, the game's vast open world opens up, as one of the various available playlists is suggested to the player. These playlists are a themed collection of races, usually about 4 to 8 per series, with each introducing its own quirks to the formula. Now, this is a departure from Forza Horizon games, where most events are loosely connected from the racing style or their general area at best. Here, we find off-road competitions, street events, drag races, drift challenges, and time trials, usually with very specific cars on loan. All these are introduced by a pretty fancy intro too, and feature a nice array of cars that fit the theme of the event, with the playlist's hosts giving us cool tidbits about the culture of the kind of event or car we're exploring. As said, these playlists often have their own unique gameplay variations as well. There might be optional objectives such as keeping the damage to the minimum since we're driving very expensive and rare cars, all the way down to the very memorable Vintage Garage series where minimap, turbo, and such are turned off at first, as we throw back to historic cars from decades ago, with the soundtrack featuring retro tunes as well. Even the color palettes and on-track decorations vary from one another, giving a further unique visual quirk to these various themed events, with the open world itself also presenting such opportunities. Since Forza Horizon still refuses to go to Japan, the Crew Motorfest goes there. Sort of. On this Hawaiian landscape, there's a Japanese quarter in one of the towns, with the related playlist filling up the place with neon lights in the night and colorful inflatable dragons rocking the skies. It may not be Japan itself, but it certainly feels like it, with again even the vast soundtrack adapting to oriental-infused sounds and the modern EDM, rock, trap, etc. beats. Sometimes even the race structure itself drastically changes from one playlist to another, with some even introducing pit stops and tire wear to the mix. On the flip side, a handful of these playlists are fairly generic, with the one made in collaboration with YouTube channel Dayone Media that I found to be rather cringe given the hard-to-like obnoxious nature of the presenter. The game almost forgets to tell the player, but this is by all means an evolution of the Crew 2 with almost no features lost in the transition. That means that the iconic vehicle transformations are back, with the player being able to immediately shapeshift between ground vehicle, being a car, a bike, or whatever, an air-based one, planes essentially, and a boat, a speedboat usually. This can be done on the fly at any moment, even mid-air, creating transitions that still feel mighty cool to this day, despite having done them a million times in the Crew 2 before. It's curious because the game is absolutely focused on the car racing, the car culture, so there seems to be far less variety in content when it comes to races on water or air. Still, it's a nice feature to have, and it makes the open world exploration a lot more thrilling when you can just hop on top of a mountain via shapeshifting into a fast plane instead of having to find a lengthy road up. Though of course, fast travel locations are unlocked as the game progresses as well. And there's absolutely no shortage of vehicles, with all of the Crew 2's cars, boats, and planes making a comeback, and plenty of newcomers as well, giving us a list of already above 600 available rides to play with. The vehicle handling in a game is very much a matter of taste, habits, and style, but it's not a hot take to point out that the Crew 2 didn't have the most satisfying of driving models, especially when compared to the other similar games in the market. Motorfest brings various tweaks to that, especially in regards to ground-based vehicles, which feel smoother and more natural than ever. The sole exception to this, for my sensitivities anyway, is drifting, which is not quite as arcade and easygoing as the rest of the game. By turning on all drift assists, it feels slightly better, but still falls below recent titles like Forza Horizon 5 or Need for Speed Unbound. In short, the act of racing against the clock or other drivers is excellent, and so is traversing the vast and varied open world of this rendition of Hawaii. It's the remainder of the side activities that doesn't quite hit as hard. Like in every open world racing game in recent memory, do expect the usual variety of speed checks, drift zones, and more, with the creative escape mode making a return from the previous game as well. Aside from that, the open world feels extremely void for the most part, with each playlist merely unlocking a series of graffitis, little statues, and so on that players will need to find on the mini-map, drive over to them, and hold the A button to unlock. With collectibles usually being located in fairly large clusters, these exploration phases really boil down to a mindless driving from point A to B to C, and aside from a few sets like a series of drone statues that can be found on rooftops, they really are easy and formulaic. Even the random colored loot boxes from the Crew 2 spawn again in Motorfest, and the system hasn't become more fun or complex since. And speaking of the loot inside of those. Similarly uninspired is this loot system, which remains the same from the Crew 2 given the complete carryover of any and all vehicles and their upgrades. Winning events and finding treasures in the aforementioned open world activities nets these colored tier loot items for each vehicle's class, with flat numbers that define its stats, and as the rarity goes up, gives some various boosts to EXP, loot finding, and more. With a limited inventory for said items and all progression boiling down to this class goes up 750, so I need to find an item that says 750 on it, it really isn't anything special, and it barely adds to the general experience. Plus, in most online modes, the cars are stock anyway, though this is a positive, so these upgrades mainly serve for solo play. The Crew Motorfest features a large, shared open world, once again very similar to Forza Horizon in execution. That means that players can find other racers all around the map, minding their own business, and they can team up or race each other if they so desire at any time. Events can be played together in co-op, custom races too can be set up against real opponents, but perhaps most exciting of them all are the random events that pop up in the open world every 30 or so minutes. These range from large team-based destruction derby battle royales, even featuring the usual drop phase with their cars falling from a plane onto the ground, to extended multi-class races against dozens of other opponents at the same time. For some reason, the game's handling, generous checkpoint hitboxes, and cars not being crazy heavy makes for races that are far less chaotic and unsportsmanlike compared to what we usually see in other races of this kind, with these events really being a blast at times. And with cars being leveled and the same rule sets applying to everyone, it's pure competition like it should be. Other than that, expect the barrage of features and quality of life twerks that are present in practically all open world racing games nowadays, for the most part, in this case with little to no change to what we saw in the Crew 2. Custom liveries and car painting, with the possibility of sharing your creations online and downloading those of others, a detailed and feature-rich photo mode that allows the creation of very customizable screenshots with even time of day and weather that can be changed on the fly, a combo system that allows scoring points and EXP while in the open world, so that drifts, close calls with incoming traffic, and all kinds of stunts help the player progress, a rewind system that allows players to go back in time up to 15 seconds if they make a mistake, a day-night cycle with dynamic weather, and so on. Again, for the most part, the game's core is nearly identical to 2018's The Crew 2, with most of the differences boiling down to the actual racing events, so expect virtually everything you've seen there in Motorfest as well. The previous installment in the Crew franchise wasn't at one point the hottest game in town from a technical point of view, stuck to a frankly very outdated 30 frames per second even on Xbox One X and Series X for the longest time, with most assets not quite up to par with the competition either. This has eventually changed with a next-gen patch, bringing the game up to speed a bit, most importantly unlocking said 60 frames per second. The Crew Motorfest maintains this option, though a graphics mode of 30 FPS exists too, but I'd never use that in a fast racer like this. Most importantly, the game features much more convincing lights and shadows, better particles, and all of that gives the whole game world a less flat feeling. The vehicles itself remained pretty much the same as before, and in truth some assets like the human characters leave a lot to be desired at times, but the Crew Motorfest visuals shine where it matters most, the actual races. It wouldn't be a big arcade racer without a bombastic licensed soundtrack, and I'm happy to report that the Crew Motorfest has one of the finest selections in recent memory. The power of the riff radio has all kinds of modern rock from the like of the Black Keys to Bones. The EDM radio packs names such as Martin Garrix and Bauer. and even a radio station called Hit and Outrun that has all kinds of retrowave and synthwave tunes from artists like Crystal Shards to Chromatic. With plenty of songs in various genres inspired by the sounds and cultures of the locations the game itself takes cues from, like the aforementioned Japanese playlist, it feels like almost every kind of event has its fitting handful of tunes you can't go wrong with. Thus, the Crew Motorfest is a frankly quite shameless Forza Horizon imitation, with entire design elements, audiovisual choices, and more practically copied one-to-one from Playground Games' highly successful franchise. But despite that, or perhaps precisely because of that, Motorfest is the most exhilarating, fun, and satisfying the franchise has ever been, with improved handling, graphics, less clustered progression, and even a few smart tweaks to Horizon's ideas. It features much more unique events, combined with a more varied selection of vehicle styles, including bikes, planes, and boats, even though the latter aspect feels like a remainder from the previous game, rather than something that received major focus. It may not reach the stellar highs of the Forza Horizon series, with the loot game and open world side activities remaining a bit still like in the previous game, but the Crew Motorfest is a lovely open world arcade racer that fans of said formula should definitely try. And judging by Ubisoft and the crew's recent history, it's safe to say that there will be plenty of excellent content additions for months if not years to come.